Today, I want to talk about a recent online debate over a red button and a blue button. Picture this. There are two buttons in front of you, one red and one blue. Everyone on Earth has to press one of them without knowing how anyone else will vote. If you press the red button, you survive no matter what anyone else chooses. Whether blue finishes above half or below half, anyone who pressed red survives. If you press the blue button, you survive only if more than half of all people choose blue. If fewer than half choose blue, everyone who chose blue dies. If everyone presses red, everyone survives. So, which button would you press? Choose one now. Red or blue, did you press one of them? Leave your choice in the comments as 1 or 2. Number 1 is red, and number 2 is blue. Going by these rules alone, red is safer for your own survival. With red, your outcome doesn't depend on anyone else. With blue, whether you live or die depends on what everyone else chooses. And yet people still choose differently. We all hear the same rules, but do we all understand them as the same problem? I'm not here to decide which button is the right answer. I'm not going to say that people who choose red are smarter, or that people who choose blue are kinder. I want to take a closer look at why the same rules can lead people to different choices, starting with what each person may be thinking. Hi, I'm Sally. This time, I'm taking a break from the Korean history stories I usually tell to try something a little different. When I first started YouTube, I thought it would be nice if the channel could at least pay for my coffee someday. At this rate, though, even that might take a few years. So for now, I decided to set the whole money thing aside and talk about things I've been curious about for a while. Recently, I watched a video about the red and blue buttons. I got curious enough to track down MrBeast's post on X. Reading the post itself made me realize how different the same problem can feel depending on how it's explained. That made me wonder about two things. Can changing the wording or the order of the same facts change what people choose? And can two people read exactly the same wording yet understand it to mean different things? I started paying closer attention to these differences when I began making videos and writing my own scripts. When I was reading an article or a book, it was easy to let a word or sentence pass without thinking much about it. But once I had to do the writing myself, I couldn't just let those choices go. Once you've watched the same words turn into something else just by reordering them, you can't read anyone else's sentences the easy way again. This video was no exception. Deciding what order to read you those rules in took me longer than anything else. Once those two questions were in my head, I wanted to see for myself whether hearing the same problem described in a different way would change my choice. The first question you heard was my own way of spelling out the same rules. Keep your first answer in mind. Now let's look at MrBeast's actual post. I'll put it on screen too, so you can see the exact wording. A few months ago, this question was making the rounds online. When MrBeast posted it on X, it got another wave of attention. And yes, the setup in the post really does involve everyone on Earth. This time, listen to it in the exact order it appears in the post. Everyone on Earth takes a private vote by pressing a red or blue button. If more than 50% of people press the blue button, everyone survives. If less than 50% of people press the blue button, only people who press the red button survive. Which button would you press? Be honest. So, which one do you choose this time? Before you decide, here's the numbering again. Number 1 is red, and number 2 is blue. Choose one more time. Have you decided? Is it the same button you chose before? Keep that second choice in mind too. It's fine if your answer stayed the same. And it's fine if it changed. Now let's look at the actual poll result. Over 310,000 votes came in over 24 hours. Blue received 56%, and red received 44%. A single X poll can't tell us how people around the world would choose, and the post didn't explain why the question was being asked. Still, a split like that is pretty interesting. More importantly, the poll asked only which button people chose. It didn't ask why they chose it. At first glance, blue can look like the choice that saves everyone, while red can look like the choice to save only yourself. But once you slow down and follow the rules, it isn't that simple. For a moment, let's look only at your own survival. If more than half of all people press blue, the people who pressed red survive too. If fewer than half press blue, the people who pressed red still survive. And if everyone presses red, everyone survives. So choosing red means your survival doesn't depend on everyone else's decisions. But that doesn't mean we can assume someone chose red because they wanted other people to die. And here's where something odd shows up. People read the same rules, and a different question catches them first. One person looks at these rules and lands on this question first. Is my survival in other people's hands? Hold on to that question and the answer is red. Not because you distrust anyone, but because if everyone picks the safe side, nobody dies. Another person looks at the same rules and lands on a different question first. What would it take for the people who chose blue to survive too? Hold on to that question and the answer is blue. Some people are bound to choose blue, and for them to live, blue has to clear half. Both of them read the rules correctly. Neither one missed a condition. So maybe the answers didn't split because there were two buttons. Maybe they were sitting in front of two different questions from the start. Whether that's actually true, we'll check in a moment. So what changed between the first question and the second one? The first question began by telling you what would happen if you chose red. No matter what everyone else chooses, I survive. If I press blue, my outcome depends on what other people choose. MrBeast's post, on the other hand, leads with this. If blue gets a majority, everyone survives. Only after that does it say that if blue falls below half, only the people who pressed red survive. But I noticed an even bigger difference. The post never directly says that if you press red, you survive no matter what anyone else chooses. It also never directly says that if everyone presses red, everyone survives. Both are natural implications of the two outcomes stated in the post. In my first question, I pulled them out and stated them up front. So the core setup stayed the same, but I made outcomes explicit that the post only implied, and I changed the order of the explanation too. The first question organized the outcomes around the button you press. The second organized them around the percentage of people who press blue. The first version can make red sound like the choice that guarantees your own survival. The second can make blue sound like the choice that could save everyone. Psychologists call this the framing effect. Describing the same outcome in different words can change what people choose. The experiment that made the name famous ran in 1981. Participants were given this situation. A fictional outbreak is spreading, and if nothing is done, 600 people are expected to die. One of two response plans has to be chosen. The researchers wrote this mathematically identical problem in two different ways, one in terms of how many people would live, the other in terms of how many would die. Call them the lives version and the deaths version. Each group saw only one. The group with the lives version got these options. The first plan will definitely save 200 of the 600 people. The second plan has a 1/3 chance of saving all 600 and a 2/3 chance of saving no one. In that group, 72% chose the plan that would definitely save 200 people. The group with the deaths version received the exact same two plans, worded like this. With the first plan, 400 people will definitely die. With the second, there is a 1/3 chance that no one dies and a 2/3 chance that all 600 die. This time, 78% chose the second plan, the one that left the outcome to chance. Saving 200 people and losing 400 are the same arithmetic. The possible outcomes and their probabilities were identical. Yet the group with the lives version leaned towards certainty, and the group with the deaths version leaned toward the gamble. The problem didn't change, only the sentences did, and the majority choice flipped. Of course, the story doesn't end with one experiment. In 1998, a meta-analysis pulled together 136 framing studies, about 30,000 participants in all. Overall, the tendency held: wording shifts choices. But the difference wasn't always large, and depending on how a study designed its questions, it could grow or nearly vanish. So what about the order? In one large survey in the United States, People chose the 3 qualities they considered most important for a child to have from a list of 13. One group saw the list in its original order. Another saw the exact same list in reverse. The content was the same, but items near the beginning of the list were chosen more often. Honesty, for example, was selected by about 66% of people when it appeared near the front, compared with about 48% when it appeared near the end. Of course, this survey asked people to choose 3 qualities from a list of 13, and the 2 groups were not assigned completely at random. We can't carry the results straight over to the button question, but the 2 list orders were associated with different response patterns in this survey. Something similar may be happening with the button question. When you first hear that you'll survive no matter what anyone else does, choosing blue and counting on a majority can sound like a risk you don't need to take. When you first hear that everyone could survive, red can feel like choosing to save yourself while leaving others behind. So what about my second hypothesis? Can 2 people hear the exact same sentence and still take it to mean different things? Imagine you're in a car with a friend, and from the passenger seat your friend says, "It's really cold in here." That could be a simple comment about the temperature, or it could be a request to turn on the heater. The word heater is nowhere in that sentence. We don't only take in the words that are there, we fill in the space where words aren't, and that's how we settle on a meaning. But that's talk drifting past. A line sitting in front of you and writing should be different. No face to read, nobody there to ask, so what's written is all there is. Let me show you one short line. A message comes in. Can you get it to me by the end of the week? By when? Whatever day just came to mind. That's all I needed. Mine was Friday. Some of you landed on Friday, I think. Some of you landed on the weekend. But that sentence never said Friday, and it never said Sunday. There are 2 different days a week ends on. On a calendar it ends Sunday night. At work it ends Friday evening. The end of the week doesn't tell you which one it means, so the space was empty and each of us filled it from our own life. If your work stops at the weekend, you filled in Friday. If your work carries on, you filled in Sunday night. The person who read it as Friday and the person who read it as Sunday both read the sentence correctly. Neither of them missed a word. Does that sound familiar? The part I've spent the longest with is what comes next. Once you've filled it in, that day feels like it was in the sentence all along. So 2 people who filled it in differently will each insist, but that's what it said. Was it just carelessly written? The person who wrote it had one date in their head too. It was obvious to them, so there was nothing to spell out. You could just ask, but nobody asks. Everyone is sure of their own answer. And a gap like that in a sentence isn't something anyone discovered late. It's where people who study language began, a very long time ago, by separating what a sentence says from what it gets across without saying. What they established, though, stops at there being a gap. That we fill it differently from one another came afterwards, from actually asking people. So what researchers argue about now isn't whether readings split. It's which words split them, and by how much. By this point I was looking at that post again. Press red and you survive whatever anyone else chooses. If everyone presses red, everyone survives. Those are the 2 lines I told you the post never actually contained. We followed the cases it did spell out, and we filled the rest in ourselves, the same way the end of the week never named a day, and then we believed we had read it. So let's go back to what we set aside earlier. Remember the 2 readings we walked through? Is my survival in other people's hands? And what would it take for the people who chose blue to survive too? Back then it was just a plausible guess, but even that one short line had a space to fill. A set of rules with several conditions woven together has more of them. That is as far as I can take it. A different choice is not enough to conclude that someone misread the rules or was more selfish, and perhaps in front of the same sentence, we were solving different problems from the very start. And choosing twice here did not make this a formal experiment. Everyone heard both questions in the same order, and before the second one, I had already told you what I was curious about. In the first version, I also spelled out outcomes that the post itself only implied. So whether your answer changed or stayed the same, this alone can't establish a framing effect. What we did was closer to a small exercise in noticing how we interpreted each version. It can still help you see why you picked that button and which conditions you treated as most important. Now, think back to both of your choices. Were your first and second answers the same? If your answer changed, I'd like to know what kind of problem each version sounded like to you. If your answer stayed the same, I'd like to know which consideration continued to matter most, no matter how the wording changed. If you already left your first choice in the comments, reply to it. If not, start a new comment. Either way, put your first choice, your second choice, and how you understood the question on one line. For example, first choice, 1. Second choice, 2. At first, it sounded like a problem about my own guaranteed survival. The second time, it sounded like a problem about getting enough people to choose blue so that everyone survives, blue voters included. One line like that is all you need. If we get at least 100 responses that include all three parts, I'll tally how many people changed their answer and group the ways viewers understood the two versions, then post the summary in a pinned comment. When you think about it, we already live this way. There's a colleague who sat in the same meeting, heard the same words, and remembers something different. There's someone at your own dinner table who heard the same story and took it another way. And we don't call them wrong. Taking something differently isn't a fault. Some people simply think differently, and knowing that, we still get along with them. And if your answer changed after hearing a different version, that doesn't necessarily mean the first one was wrong. A different framing may simply have made another side of the problem stand out more. The next time someone puts two choices in front of me, I think I'll look at the wording one more time before I choose. Whose point of view is the sentence written from? Which condition comes first, and which comes later? And what kind of problem does the question sound like to me? There were two buttons, but the problem we were each solving in front of them was not the same problem. If you enjoyed this video or could relate to it, please subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. See you next time.